wind had plagued this canyon since before the time of man.
Do you know the person, or did you see the person whom you claim attacked you in your friend?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a name of the individual, or can you give me a description of the individual?
Since last night. It drives some kind of old truck or RV.
RV?
Said get in the car.
If you're trying to steal my car...
See those headlights? When those headlights reach us, you are going to die. Now get in.
Oh, you're kidding with this, right?
I don't understand. Who?
It's a vampire. That's simple.
A vampire.
Get in!
I couldn't. I love the night. That's the only time I feel really alive.
That's what David wanted. Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster the breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down. You know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. Go find me on Instagram, The Beautiful Dead Podcast, to see everything I'm up to. And it's especially important if you haven't done it yet, because next weekend is MegaCon. I can't believe it. It came so fast. I have so much to do. I want to go down there with my best foot forward, like really ready. I have a brand new vampire panel to do. It's a 4-day con. They're expecting like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of attendees. The Cullens are there. This is huge. So it's very possible I might not have an episode next weekend. It's going to depend on if I have time to do anything. So you need to be following me on Instagram so you can see if I decide to do an episode, not do an episode, and also what I'm doing down in Orlando. I have a 14-hour drive to get down there, 4 days in Orlando. It should be a whirlwind, but there should be lots of good content, and hopefully I have the time to go live. I don't know. It looks like it's going to be very, very busy. So I'm taking stuff from Vampa. And speaking of my time in Philly, I did record something special for Valentine's Day weekend, so make sure you're watching out for that. So if you haven't, you need to subscribe, follow me so that you don't miss anything. I'm really excited for the Valentine's Day weekend episode. So I don't want to take a lot of time. I have so much to do, but I did want to come here and talk to you guys about this movie that was sitting on my watch list for a very long time. Prime recommended it, and sometimes Prime gives me some, golden nuggets, sometimes not so much. So I threw caution to the wind and I rented it for $3.99 on Prime, and let's just say that I want my money back. I'm still mad about the $20 I spent to rent Morbius, but now I can add $4 to it. So Prime has gotten $24 for me at least on these awful, awful movies that I watch in the sake of this podcast. So I just want to jump right in and kind of get this over with. Very, very quick summary. We are talking about a movie called There's No Such Thing as Vampires. And there's not a lot out there about it. The summary is very, very brief. And we're going to talk about it and then hopefully never, ever, ever talk about it again. If you've never listened to this podcast or watched this channel, massive spoiler alerts. I talk about everything, who hooks up with who dies, how they die, who kills them, all that good stuff. So we are going to go ahead without any further ado and just jump right in. No frills, no nothing. Let's do this. Summary. Joshua interrupts a showing of Nosferatu in order to warn the viewers that vampires are very real, only to be taunted by a cowled figure, Maximilian. With Maximilian in pursuit, Joshua flees to the desert and gets involved in a motor vehicle collision with Ariel. The two flee after Ariel experiences a vision of her dead mother. They head to a friend's of Ariel's, David, in hopes that he can help them evade potential harm and death. There you go. That's your plot right there. So, vampiric references and crossovers. There actually was one. Meg Foster is in this very briefly, and then she's in a few episodes of the originals. And I'm sure you know Meg Foster. I'll put a picture up on YouTube, but I'm sure you know her. She had a very brief moment in this movie. That's the only crossover. But as for references, the movie opens with a showing of the original 20s Nosferatu, and then when they reach Ariel's friend's house, David, he has a poster for Nosferatu and then also a poster for Dracula's daughter. So we had a couple little flashes of vampires in there. All right, let's do it. Let's break down the universe of there's no such thing as vampires. Relationship to humans. The vampires feed on humans. That's it. No love affair. There's no like trying to work with the humans, trying to be part of the humans. There's none of that. It's not that kind of universe. The humans are for feeding on only. A relationship to animals. I want you to get very used to hearing the phrase "that was never addressed," because I'm going to say it a lot, because I don't think they put a whole ton of thought into the actual vampires when they wrote this vampire film. Because again, who expects some vampire nerd to talk about it on a podcast? Appearance. He is cloaked, so it's very, very hard to see him until the end. When we finally do, his face is gray and it has this like slick, rubbery looking appearance. His skin does. It almost looks reptilian. In the final confrontation, he removes his cloak and we see that he's bald with large pointed ears. There's like these ridges along his skull that almost look like ram's horns. In the shadows, he looks a little bit like Frankenstein's monster in his size. But when Josh is turned at the very end, he just has two fangs and bright green eyes. So, I don't know. Maybe they blew all the makeup budget on one vampire. Possible. Fangs. So our master vampire, Max, has all sharp teeth, with the canines being longer than the rest. Whereas Josh and the other turned vampires just have two long canines. Blood. Yes, he drinks blood. Food. We never see him eat. Sunlight. And we never see him in sunlight. Sleep. So he drives around in an RV. So think of Near Dark. And I'm so sorry to everybody involved in Near Dark that I even connected you to this movie at all. But think of Near Dark. It's like that. He's in an RV with all the windows darkened. And then when they finally break into this RV at the end, he has a wooden box in the back for him to sleep in. If there's soil in it, I have no idea. All I know is it's a wooden box. And that is what Josh sleeps in at the end. Holy items. This is never addressed. Powers. He can enter your mind and change what you see. He makes Ariel see her dead mother, like talking to her from the field. He can mess with your reality. He makes the one cop think the other cops are devils. So he's like shooting at all his fellow police officers and then turns the gun on himself. And the vampire is fast and strong, you know, as vampires are. Rules. Well, we know he can enter the residence without being invited because he goes into David's house and kills Peter and clearly was not invited in there. That's it. That's it for the rules. If he's casts a reflection, can touch silver, can cross water, I don't know any of that. There's just not that much to these vampires. How are they made? So Josh is bitten by Max, who we think is like the master vampire. And Josh says, "I'm already infected. I can feel the sun." So it's a one bite infection kind of situation, kind of zombie-like in the fact that he's bitten, he starts to feel it, and then within like an hour, he's turned. How do they die? So Max is staked in the heart and he drops. But then at the very end, he opens his eyes and tells another vampire they missed. So obviously you have to hit the heart, or you got to get the heart and chop off the head. But definitely sunlight. I don't know though, because we never see him in the sunlight. We never see any vampires in the sunlight. So if they burn in the sunlight, I have no idea. But wherever they were supposed to stake, they didn't. Are they good or are they bad? So the vampire is supposed to be the bad guy, but honestly, I don't care. This is going to be the fastest episode we've ever had. There is so little to dig into. Oh, Juliet wants in. Hold on a second. All right. Juliet is now in. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. When it's done right, I love a fated mate trope. Like two souls who find each other each time they're reincarnated. And this is the big reveal at the end, is that, we'll talk about it, but apparently these are fated souls who just keep reincarnating and finding each other. Whatever. Tropes I hate. The weird religious person in the middle of nowhere who gives a creepy speech about what the hero is up against. So I wrote down that I hated that trope, but then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, actually, I really, really like that trope. We see that, and it's made fun of so well in Cabin in the Woods. I think they call him the Harbinger, but I am freaking here for that trope. I think that I flipped the two in my notes. I think what I was trying to say is I love a fated mate, but in this it's not really done very well, so I hated that. But something I do love is the weird religious person in the middle of nowhere who gives a creepy speech about what the hero is up against. Look, I cared so little for this movie that I messed up my own notes. And you know what? I'm not editing this out. This is what you get. All right, ratings. We're only 12 minutes in. This really is like the fastest episode I think I've ever had. All right, how scary or evil are the vampires of There's No Such Thing as Vampires? So he is bound by the sun. He can't really move easily amongst the humans because he looks so inhuman. So it's not very hard or very easy for him to infiltrate human society. He really has to hide a lot. Apparently he's very old and in life was a sorcerer, and according to the end of the movie, not only is he not dead, but he planned this entire thing. It seems like he's hard to kill, and per the story that we hear, he's evil at his very core, per the creepy nun. But I think his singular focus of getting a hold of his son does kind of distract him and almost works as a weakness. I don't really want to reward this film, but I do have to look at everything that's laid out in front of me objectively, and I had to give him a respectable 6 out of 10. Stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. He's obviously very evil, but it just didn't play out on screen very well. How sexy or alluring are the vampires of this movie? This is an easy one. 1 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. End of story. Full stop. I gave him his honorary vamp point. He really should just be happy with that and walk away. All right, my thoughts. I just feel like this movie didn't know what it wanted to be. I just feel like they had a whole bunch of different ideas and they kind of threw them all together, but they really didn't know how to make it all work or bring it all together. They didn't know how to do it or what to write. It felt all over the place. So the plot that is supposed to be figured out by the end, the twist. So we see these silent movies from the early 1900s, and it has Maximilian and his son. And it's explained that Max was like this sorcerer who was then banished to the US, and because he was so evil, he is, now this evil creature. So then the nun calls him the Dark Wind, and she says the Dark Wind was here when the first tribes arrived. Well, that doesn't line up. So let's say you got banished in 1920. What do you mean when the tribes first arrived? They've been here for centuries at that point in time, so that doesn't make sense. Then Max, the vampire, captures Josh, and Josh has memories. The reason he went to the Nosferatu thing and said vampires are real is because he was out camping with 4 of his friends, And this vampire comes out of nowhere, slaughters his 4 friends, and then he takes off running, which is how he ends up in the theater and then ends up in this car accident. So he's like having memories of the night with his friends, but then he's also having memories of these silent films that he shot with his dad, Max, like 120 years prior. So then I was like, okay, so is this the actual son who's lived a century but has no memories until now, or is it supposed to be reincarnation? And then I was like, is the Dark Wind the original vampire who turned Max once he got here? But then Ariel goes into the vampire's RV and she finds these old-timey pictures and this poster that says, "See Maximilian the illusionist with his son Joshua and blushing bride Ariella." So then we're like, okay, so apparently Max was this evil sorcerer who gets banished to the United States. He gets turned into a vampire. Either he's the Dark Wind or he was turned by the Dark Wind and now he's inherited the Dark Wind, like the Dread Pirate Roberts. And then Josh and Ariel were his son and daughter-in-law, and now they're reincarnated here in the United States, and their soul is in these new bodies that look exactly the same. Now Max is trying to track them down, and then he says to this vampire, like, this is all part of my plan. So his plan was to like find his son, turn his son, and then together they're gonna rise up as these armies of evil vampires to take over humans. And I was like, what? So then at one point I was like, is this like a hell loop that they're stuck in? Like, it was so confusing. So then we get to the final scene, okay? And we get the villain's monologue. And he explains like, yes, you are reincarnated souls. Josh is now starting to remember his previous life. So we're like, okay, fine, we'll go with that story. So then Max is like, I'm going to make you a god for the upcoming battle between vampire and human. And I was like, what? So I feel like what happened was somebody or a group of people had this cool idea and they're like, yes, there's a whole movie in this. So then they sat down, but they didn't know how to make it cohesive. So it just became this really sloppy script that was then given to very mediocre actors. It was very, very low budget, and they didn't really think this all through at all. I mean, one of the things I keep saying on this podcast, and I've said it before, is it's not the money that makes a great movie, okay? Money can help a great movie be better, but it's a great script and great actors that make a great movie. End of story. It's not about money. You can't use that as an excuse. So I looked at this and I was like, if it weren't for the fangs, I wouldn't have even called this a vampire movie. It was so all over the place, not thought out, sloppy. And then the last scene, he opens his eyes and he's like, they missed, and this was all part of my plan. And Ariel is speeding off in the RV with Josh, who's now a vampire, getting ready to sleep in his dad's coffin. And I was like, they thought they were gonna get a sequel. The audacity to think that that script is so good and what you've created is so good that you're leaving room for a sequel. Oh, I think that's what made me the most upset. Was like, you got your chance. You got your chance to make a movie and it was shit. And how dare you think you're gonna get a second one? So I would not give this movie another second of my time. I have too much to do. I want my $4.26 back. I never want to talk about this again. It actually makes me angry that I lost an hour and a half to this when I have so much to do. So I am going to wrap this up. This is a 20-minute episode. This might be the quickest episode we have ever had on this podcast, season 5. Let's this is our record, 20 minutes. But please go follow me on Instagram. Subscribe if you haven't. If you made it to the end, put in the comments, sequel, exclamation point. How dare they think they get a sequel? And then please follow me on Instagram. If I don't have something next weekend, I'm sorry, but go check out what I'm doing down in MegaCon and then see what I'm bringing you for Valentine's Day. I hope you love it. It's my Valentine to you because I love you all and I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
finish. Thank you.